This story is not for the faint of heart. Fear is a part of you. There's no turning back. The nightmare has begun. The metallic tang of stale water and something far fouler assaulted Mark's nostrils as his head broke the surface. One moment, he was walking home beneath the indifferent glow of Phoenix streetlights. The next, the ground had dissolved beneath him. Now, slick concrete pressed against his back, the air thick with the unseen. He coughed, spitting out brackish liquid, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Above the circular maw of the open manhole was a distant, mocking eye of light. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at his throat. He yelled, his voice swallowed by the echoing dampness of the sewer. No response. Just the drip, drip, drip of unseen water and the scuttling sound that could be rats, or something far worse. He pushed himself into a sitting position, his hands sinking into a sludge of indeterminate origin. The beam of his phone, miraculously still functioning, cut a weak swath through the darkness. Graffiti, faded and grotesque, adorned the curved walls. He recognized gang tags, but also symbols that made his skin crawl. Crude, unsettling drawings that seemed to writhe in his peripheral vision. The air hung heavy, a suffocating blanket of humidity and decay. Each breath felt like inhaling the city's hidden sickness. He had to get out. Logic, battling the rising tide of fear, told him to follow the flow. Water found its way to larger pipes, eventually to an exit. He started walking, the beam of his phone his only companion in the oppressive blackness. The tunnel sloped gently downwards, the concrete underfoot uneven and treacherous. The scuttling sounds persisted, sometimes close, sometimes further away, always just out of sight. He imagined slick, whiskered faces, sharp teeth glinting in the dark. Hours bled into each other. His phone battery dwindled, the circle of light shrinking, amplifying the unseen terrors beyond its reach. The smell intensified, a cloying sweetness mingling with the putrid stench of sewage. He passed junctions, each tunnel leading deeper into the labyrinthine underbelly of the city. Some were narrow, forcing him to hunch. Others opened into larger chambers where the echoes of his footsteps seemed to awaken unseen inhabitants. He found markings on the walls, more than just graffiti. Scratches, deep and deliberate, forming patterns that defied any logical explanation. They looked ancient, primal, and sent a shiver of unease down his spine. He tried to ignore them, focusing on the faint sound of rushing water ahead. A larger pipe, maybe his way out. The tunnel widened abruptly. The air grew colder, a damp chill that seeped into his bones. The rushing water was louder now, and he could see a faint glimmer in the distance. Hope, fragile but persistent, flickered within him. But as he rounded a bend, the glimmer resolved itself into something far more disturbing. A light source, yes, but not the pale glow of the surface. This light was sickly green, pulsating, and it emanated from a tunnel branching off to the side, a tunnel that seemed to descend into an even deeper darkness. And from within that green-lit passage came a low, guttural moan that resonated deep within his chest, a sound that spoke of unimaginable suffering and ancient evil. His escape route had become a doorway to something far more terrifying than the fall. The guttural moan hung in the stagnant air, a chilling testament to something profoundly wrong within the green-lit tunnel. Mark froze, his hand instinctively tightening around his phone. The fragile hope that had flickered within him died a swift, brutal death. This wasn't an exit, it was an invitation to a darkness that felt ancient and hungry. He fought the urge to turn and flee back the way he came. The thought of retracing his steps through the miles of echoing tunnels, the unseen scuttling always just behind him, was almost as terrifying as the unknown that lay ahead. Besides, the green light, sickly and unnatural as it was, offered the only illumination in this subterranean labyrinth. Taking a shaky breath, he edged closer to the branching tunnel. The moaning had stopped, replaced by a low rhythmic thrumming that vibrated through the concrete floor. The green light pulsed with this rhythm, casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the damp walls. The air grew heavier, thick with a metallic scent that was different from the coppery tang of the water. Sharper, almost like blood. He peered into the green-lit passage. It sloped steeply downwards, the walls slick with a viscous, dark substance that glistened in the unnatural glow. The thrumming intensified, and he could now discern a pattern within the rhythm. A slow, deliberate beat that echoed the frantic pounding of his own heart. Hesitantly, he stepped into the tunnel. The green light enveloped him, casting his skin in an unsettling pallor. The air was strangely warm here, a humid heat that felt unnatural deep underground. The walls were no longer smooth concrete but rough, uneven stone, as if this part of the sewer system was far older, perhaps even predating the city itself. As he descended further, the tunnel opened into a large circular chamber. The source of the green light was now visible. Strange, bioluminescent fungi that clung to the walls and ceiling, their pulsating glow casting an eerie luminescence over the scene. And in the center of the chamber, something moved. It was vaguely humanoid in shape, but impossibly elongated and gaunt. Its limbs were thin and spindly, its skin stretched taut over sharp bones. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, its head lolling to one side. But it was the sound that truly chilled him to the bone. Not the moan from before, but a soft, wet, sucking sound, as if it were feeding on something unseen in the shadows. Mark's breath hitched in his throat. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body seemed frozen in place, his mind struggling to comprehend the horror before him. This wasn't a rat. This wasn't some homeless person who had lost their way. This was something else, something that shouldn't exist. The creature turned its head, its empty eye socket seeming to fixate on him even without visible eyes. The sucking sound stopped. A low, rasping growl emanated from its throat, a sound that promised unimaginable pain. The green light pulsed faster, and the thrumming intensified, resonating with a primal fear that gripped Mark's soul. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that his descent into the shadows had only just begun. The creature took a step, its elongated limbs moving with a disturbing fluidity that belied its skeletal frame. The rasping growl intensified, a guttural sound that vibrated in Mark's teeth. His paralysis finally broke. He stumbled backward, his phone clattering against the damp stone. The beam danced wildly, momentarily illuminating more of the chamber. He saw them then, others, lurking in the shadows beyond the pulsating green fungi. More of the gaunt figures, their forms indistinct but their presence a palpable weight of dread. The soft, wet sucking sound started again, closer this time, and Mark's stomach churned with a primal revulsion. He didn't want to know what they were feeding on. His mind screamed for escape, but his legs felt like lead. He scrambled backward, his hands slipping on the slick stone. He could feel the creature's gaze on him, those empty sockets burning into his soul. The air was thick with the cloying sweetness he had noticed before, now undeniably the stench of decaying flesh. He tripped over something unseen and fell heavily. The air knocked from his lungs. The creature shuffled closer, its unnatural gait bringing it within arm's reach. Mark squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. But it didn't come. Instead, the sucking sound intensified, inches from his face. He could feel the fetid breath of the creature, a warm, sickly exhalation that made him gag. He dared to open his eyes a sliver. The creature was hunched over something beside him, its attention fully consumed. In the dim green light, Mark could make out the gruesome details. It was a human torso, mangled and torn, the flesh ripped away in ragged chunks. The sucking sound was the sound of the creature feeding on the raw muscle and bone. Terror, raw and visceral, surged through Mark. He wanted to vomit, to scream, but his throat was constricted with fear. He lay there paralyzed inches from the unimaginable horror, the stench of death filling his nostrils. He noticed something then, a detail that sent a fresh wave of icy dread through him. The clothes on the mangled torso. He recognized them. The faded denim, the torn graphic tee. He had seen those clothes before, on a missing person poster downtown. A kid, barely out of high school. The realization hit at him with the force of a physical blow. These weren't just creatures. They were something that preyed on humans. Something that dragged them down into this subterranean hell to feed. The creature finished its gruesome meal and straightened up, its attention turning back to Mark. A thin, black fluid dripped from its mouth, and in the green light, it looked like a malevolent grin. It took another step, its long, skeletal fingers twitching. Desperation surged through Mark. He had to do something, anything. His hand fumbled for something, anything, on the slick stone beside him. His fingers closed around a loose rock, sharp and jagged. It was a pathetic weapon, but it was all he had. As the creature lunged, Mark screamed and swung the rock with all his might. It connected with a sickening thud against the creature's head. The creature recoiled, a high-pitched shriek tearing through the chamber. The other figures in the shadows stirred, their forms becoming more distinct in the pulsating green light. They were all the same, gaunt, elongated, with empty eyes and a hunger that radiated from them like a palpable force. Mark scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. He had a brief window of opportunity. He had to get out of this chamber. Now. Mark didn't wait to see the effect of his desperate attack. He turned and fled back the way he had come. The image of the feeding creature seared into his mind. The green light pulsed behind him, casting his frantic escape in an eerie, distorted glow. The rasping shrieks of the creatures echoed in the narrow tunnel, spurring him onward. He stumbled blindly, his feet slipping on the wet stone. The rhythmic thrumming seemed to follow him, a constant reminder of the horrors he was leaving behind, or perhaps running towards. He risked a glance back. The green light was receding, but he could still make out the gaunt figures silhouetted against its sickly luminescence, their movements jerky and unnatural. He plunged back into the darkness of the main sewer line, the beam of his phone once again his only guide. The familiar stench of sewage was almost a relief after the cloying sweetness of the chamber. But the scuttling sounds were closer now, more insistent. He imagined the creatures could hear him, their senses attuned to the slightest vibration in the subterranean silence. The tunnel branched again, and panic flared. Which way? He had no idea where he was going, no sense of direction in this lightless maze. He chose a path at random, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The tunnel narrowed, forcing him to hunch over. The concrete walls were rough here, scraping against his clothes. He could feel the dampness seeping into his skin, chilling him despite the exertion. The air grew thick and stagnant, making each breath a struggle. He started seeing the markings again, the deep, deliberate scratches on the walls, forming those unsettling primal patterns. They seemed more frequent here, almost like a language etched into the very fabric of this underworld. He tried to ignore them, to focus on the path ahead, but they seemed to stare back at him, their silent message a growing sense of dread. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, this one shrouded in darkness. The only light came from his phone, its weak beams swallowed by the vastness. The air was different here, colder, and there was a faint whisper that seemed to slither just at the edge of his hearing. He swept his phone beam around the chamber. It was circular, like the first one, but much larger. In the center, he could make out a raised platform, and on it, something that made his blood run cold. It was a skeleton, but not human. It was too large, its limbs too long, its skull elongated and grotesque. And around it, arranged in a macabre circle, were more of the strange, bioluminescent fungi, casting a faint, ethereal glow on the skeletal remains. The whispering intensified, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It sounded like voices, but distorted, twisted into something unintelligible and deeply disturbing. He felt a prickling sensation on his skin, the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. He wanted to turn back, to flee into the relative safety of the tunnels, but a morbid curiosity held him rooted to the spot. What was this place? What were these creatures? And what was the significance of this monstrous skeleton? As he stared at the skeleton, one of the glowing fungi on the platform pulsed brighter, and in its light, he saw something etched into the stone of the platform, something he had missed in the dimness. More of those strange markings, but these were larger, more intricate, forming a complex symbol that seemed to writhe before his eyes. Suddenly, the whispering stopped. The chamber fell silent, the silence more terrifying than the whispers. He felt a shift in the air, a sense of anticipation, as if something was about to happen. From the shadows at the far end of the chamber, a figure emerged. It was taller than the others he had seen, its form even more gaunt and skeletal, and in its empty eye sockets, a faint green glow began to coalesce. It raised a long, bony hand, and the symbol on the platform seemed to pulse in response. Mark felt a cold dread grip his heart. He had stumbled into something far older, far more sinister than he could have ever imagined. The gaunt figure with the glowing eyes glided silently across the chamber, its movements defying the rough terrain. Mark's phone shook in his trembling hand, the beam of light fixed on the approaching horror. He backed away slowly, his mind racing for any means of escape. The tunnel he had entered through was his only option, but the creature was cutting off his retreat. The whispering started again, softer this time, but laced with a chilling clarity. He couldn't understand the words, but the intent was unmistakable. Ancient, malevolent, and directed solely at him. The green glow in the creature's eyes intensified, and he felt a pressure building in his head, a silent scream that threatened to shatter his sanity. He noticed details about the creature he had missed before. The elongated fingers ended in sharp, black talons. Its mouth was a thin, lipless gash that seemed to stretch impossibly wide, and etched into its forehead, barely visible beneath the sickly green light, was the same intricate symbol he had seen on the platform. This wasn't just one of the feeding creatures. This was something more, something intelligent, a guardian of this unholy place. Panic threatened to overwhelm him. He had to act. He lunged to the side, scrambling towards the tunnel entrance. The creature moved with surprising speed, its long limbs propelling it forward. Mark could feel the rush of its fetid breath as it passed within inches of him. He squeezed through the narrow opening, the rough stone scraping his skin. He didn't stop to look back, didn't dare to see if the creature was following. He ran blindly through the dark tunnel, his lungs burning, his heart pounding like a drum against his ribs. The thrumming intensified again, seemingly resonating from the very walls of the tunnel. He could hear the creature behind him now, its unnatural gait creating a disturbing rhythm that echoed his own frantic footsteps. The green glow flickered in the tunnel behind him, a persistent reminder of the evil that pursued him. He came to another junction, 3 tunnels branching off into the darkness. He had no idea which way to go, but he couldn't stop. He chose the middle tunnel at random and plunged into its suffocating blackness. This tunnel sloped upwards, the air growing slightly less heavy. Hope, fragile as it was, flickered within him again. Maybe he could escape. Maybe there was a way out of this subterranean nightmare. But then he heard it, the whispering. It was closer now, right behind him, slithering into his mind. And then a cold skeletal hand clamped down on his ankle. The icy grip on my ankle sent a jolt of pure terror down my spine. I slammed onto the slick concrete, my phone skittering away into the black. Whispers, like oily tendrils, snaked into my mind. The unintelligible words a prelude to madness. I thrashed, trying to break free, but the skeletal hand was a vice. A low, wet chuckle echoed, and the guardian's sickly green eyes glowed behind me. Adrenaline surged. I kicked out with my free leg, connecting with a sickening thud. The grip loosened for a heartbeat, and I scrambled forward, tearing my shirt as the guardian snagged it. I kept crawling, the tunnel sloping sharply downwards, the air thick with the stench of decay. The guardian's scraping talons and chilling whispers were right behind me. I tumbled into a smaller chamber, the cloying sweetness and the wet, sucking sounds a nauseating chorus. Gaunt figures hunched over their gruesome meals lined the periphery of my vision. The guardian glided in, its luminous green eyes locking onto me. It moved with a slow, deliberate menace that spoke of ancient evil. Trapped. My gaze darted around the chamber, seeking any escape. Several narrow tunnels branched off into the oppressive blackness. The guardian took another deliberate step, its talons clicking on the concrete. I lunged for the nearest tunnel, a claustrophobic maw of darkness. I squeezed through the tight passage, the rough concrete tearing at my skin. The tunnel twisted and turned, swallowing the last vestiges of light. Guttural growls and rasping shrieks echoed behind me. but the narrow confines seemed to slow their pursuit. The tunnel opened abruptly into a vast cavern, the roar of rushing water deafening. A subterranean river raged in the darkness, the air thick with moisture. The darkness was absolute, but the sound of the water offered a sliver of desperate hope. A narrow ledge ran along the edge of the churning blackness. I stepped onto the precarious ledge. A wet, slithering sound behind me sent a fresh wave of icy dread through me. Something was following, something that didn't need to crawl. My phone beam caught a fleeting glimpse. A long, sinuous form, gliding effortlessly through the dark. And ahead, the faint green glow of the Guardian's eyes. Caught between the raging river, the slithering horror behind me, and the waiting Guardian in the darkness ahead, my descent into shadows had reached its most terrifying depth. The roar of the subterranean river was deafening, its churning black water a terrifying abyss to my right. Behind me, the slithering creature was getting closer, its wet, rasping breath echoing in the narrow passage. Ahead, the faint green glow of the Guardian's eyes remained a fixed point of dread in the impenetrable darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the symphony of subterranean horrors. I edged along the slippery ledge, my fingers scraping against the cold, damp stone wall for purchase. The beam of my phone danced erratically, offering fleeting glimpses of the treacherous path ahead. The slithering sound behind me intensified. I risked a quick glance over my shoulder. The creature was long and serpentine, its scales shimmering in the weak light, its movement fluid and unnervingly silent for its size. Its eyes, two pinpricks of malevolent yellow, were fixed on me. Panic clawed at my throat. I had to get across the river. But how? The ledge was narrow and crumbling, the drop into the churning water a certain death. Ahead, the Guardian remained a silent sentinel, its green eyes burning into me, radiating an ancient, malevolent intelligence. It seemed to be waiting, letting the other horrors drive me towards it. Suddenly, the ledge beneath my foot crumbled. I gasped, my body lurching towards the black void. My fingers scrabbled desperately for a hold, finding a jagged outcrop of rock just in time. I hung precariously over the raging water, the spray cold and sickening. Below, in the fleeting light of my phone, I saw movement in the black depths. Pale, elongated shapes writhed beneath the surface, their forms disturbingly familiar. The feeding creatures. They were in the river too. With a surge of adrenaline, I hauled myself back onto the ledge, my muscles screaming in protest. The slithering creature was almost upon me, its forked tongue flicking in the darkness. Desperate, I scanned the cavern ahead. On the far side of the river, I could make out a faint, flickering light. Not the sickly green of the fungi, but a warmer, more natural glow. Hope, fragile but insistent, flared within me. But to reach it, I had to cross the river. My eyes fell on a cluster of larger rocks jutting out of the water a short distance ahead. They were slick and treacherous, but they were my only chance. Taking a deep breath, I made a desperate leap to the first rock. My feet slipped, but I managed to regain my balance, my heart pounding in my chest. The roar of the water was deafening now, the spray soaking me to the bone. I leaped again and again, each jump a desperate gamble against the churning currents and the slippery surfaces. Below, I could see the pale shape swirling, waiting for me to fall. Behind me, the slithering creature hissed in frustration. Ahead, The guardian remained, its silent vigil unbroken. I reached the last rock, the far ledge tantalizingly close. But as I prepared to jump, the guardian finally moved. It glided silently to the edge of the river on the far side, its gaunt form silhouetted against the flickering light. It raised its long, skeletal hand, and the green glow in its eyes intensified. And then, I heard a new sound, a chorus of whispers, no longer unintelligible, but forming words, ancient, guttural words that seemed to rise from the depths of the earth itself, words that spoke of pain, of sacrifice, of eternal darkness. The river seemed to surge, the pale shapes below rising closer to the surface. The slithering creature behind me lunged. The guardian reached out with his taloned hand. I had reached the river of souls, and it was pulling me under. The guardian's skeletal fingers brushed against my arm, their touch icy and paralyzing. The whispers intensified, the ancient words echoing in my mind, promising an eternity of torment. The slithering creature lunged, its jaws snapping inches from my face. Below, the pale figures in the river reached upwards, their touch like icy tendrils. But the flickering light on the far side of the river pulsed brighter. It wasn't a natural light. It was something else. Something artificial, yet undeniably powerful. As the guardian's grip tightened and the slithering creature coiled to strike, I saw it clearly. The light emanated from a doorway, crudely carved into the rock face, and above the doorway, etched into the stone, was the same intricate symbol I had seen in the chamber with the skeleton, the symbol on the guardian's forehead. A wave of understanding, cold and terrifying, washed over me. This wasn't just a sewer. This was a gateway, a hidden place where something ancient and evil held sway. The creatures, the guardian, the whispers, the river of souls, they were all part of something far larger, far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. With a desperate surge of strength, fueled by pure terror and a sliver of fading hope, I twisted away from the guardian's grasp and flung myself towards the light. The jump was a desperate act, a leap of faith into the unknown. I flew through the air, the roar of the river and the hisses of the creatures fading behind me. I slammed into the rough rock of the doorway, pain exploding in my shoulder. I scrambled through the opening, collapsing onto a cold stone floor. The flickering light came from torches mounted on the walls, casting grotesque shadows that dance around the chamber. This chamber was different. It was larger, more deliberately constructed. Crude carvings adorned the walls, depicting monstrous figures and disturbing rituals. In the center of the chamber, on a raised dais, stood an altar. And on the altar, something was moving. It was a figure, draped in tattered robes, its face hidden by a deep hood. It was chanting in the same guttural language I had heard in the whispers, its voice resonating with an unnatural power. The symbol was carved into the altar, glowing faintly. As I stumbled into the chamber, the chanting stopped. The hooded figure slowly turned its head, its unseen gaze fixing on me. A chilling silence descended, broken only by the crackling of the torches. Then, the figure raised its hands, and the symbol on the altar pulsed with a blinding light. The walls of the chamber seemed to writhe, the shadows deepening, taking on grotesque forms. I felt a pressure building in my head, the whispers returning, louder now, more insistent. The hooded figure spoke, its voice a raspy whisper that echoed the ancient words. This time, I understood. You have descended too far, mortal. You have glimpsed what was meant to remain hidden. It extended a skeletal hand towards me. From its fingertips, a beam of sickly green light erupted, the same light that illuminated the tunnels below. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I hadn't found an exit. I had found the source, the heart of the darkness, and it was reaching for me. The Phoenix sewer system continues its silent work beneath the bustling city, a hidden labyrinth teeming with unseen life. Occasionally, a homeless person disappears, their absence barely a footnote in the local news. Sometimes, late at night, near certain forgotten manhole covers, residents report strange whispers carried on the wind, a fleeting sense of unease that quickly fades with the morning light. The city above remains oblivious to the ancient secrets that lie beneath, the veiled descent that awaits those who stray too far into the shadows. And the river of souls continues to flow, its dark currents carrying secrets that were never meant to reach the surface.